Hello and welcome to new and returning viewers. In November, I'll be taking a look at a variety of different fiction books. I figured a great way to start that off would be taking a look at politically correct bedtime stories and Once Upon a More Enlightened Time. These are both by James Finn Garner, and they were a lovely gift a number of years ago for my anniversary. These are both a nice, short, enjoyable read. So if you just want something to kind of kick back and relax, they're an excellent idea. Politically Correct Bedtime Stories is from 1994. Once Upon a More Enlightened Time is from 1995. So I dare say, with all the changes from then till now, even these may not be considered politically correct anymore. The first story in politically correct bedtime stories is Little Red Riding Hood, which is very different from the traditional Little Red Riding Hood, if you have ever read that, or if you've seen the movie Hoodwinked. So there are many different ways to enjoy fairy tales, and they're a great way to just have something fun and light to read. And I enjoy them because sometimes I get into some fairly heavy material or stuff that just kind of gets my head twirling, like quantum physics and all of that type of stuff, and what's the universe expanding into. So sometimes I just need something enjoyable and light to take a break and get back to my happy place and back into my studies. So Little Red Riding Hood. There once was a young person named Red Riding Hood who lived with her mother on the edge of a large wood. One day her mother asked her to take a basket of fresh fruit and mineral water to her grandmother's house, not because this was woman's work, mind you, but because the deed was generous and helped engender a feeling of community. So you can already tell from the introduction, this isn't your typical Little Red Riding Hood. Furthermore, her grandmother was not sick, but rather was in full physical and mental health and was fully capable of taking care of herself as a mature adult. So Red Riding Hood set off with her basket through the woods. Many people believed that the forest was a foreboding and dangerous place and never set foot in it. Red Riding Hood, however, was confident enough in her own budding sexuality that such obvious Freudian imagery did not intimidate her. On the way to Grandma's house, Red Riding Hood was accosted by a wolf, who asked her what was in her basket. She replied, "Some healthful snacks for my grandmother, who is certainly capable of taking care of herself as a mature adult." The wolf said, "You know, my dear, it isn't safe for a little girl to walk through the woods alone." Red Riding Hood said, "I find your sexist remark offensive in the extreme, but I'll ignore it because of your traditional status as an outcast from society, the stress of which has caused you to develop your own entirely valid worldview. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must be on my way." So we're seeing some of the language is very different. There's a focus on certain roles, expectations, and perceptions of the world. Red Riding Hood walked on along the main path, but because his status outside society had freed him from slavish adherence to linear Western-style thought, the wolf knew a quicker route to Grandma's house. He burst into the house and ate Grandma, an entirely valid course of action for a carnivore such as himself. Then, unhampered by rigid traditionalist notions of what was masculine or feminine, He put on Grandma's nightclothes and crawled into bed. Red Riding Hood entered the cottage and said, "Grandma, I have brought you some fat-free, sodium-free snacks to salute you in your role of a wise and nurturing matriarch." From the bed, the wolf said softly, "Come closer, child, so I might see you." Red Riding Hood said, "Oh, I forgot you're as optically challenged as a bat. Grandma, what big eyes you have!" "They have seen much and forgiven much, my dear." "Grandma, what a big nose you have! Only relatively, of course, and certainly attractive in its own way." "It has smelled much and forgiven much, my dear." "Grandma, what big teeth you have!" The wolf said, "I am happy with who I am and what I am," and leapt out of bed. He grabbed Red Riding Hood in his claws, intent on devouring her. Red Riding Hood screamed, not out of alarm at the wolf's apparent tendency towards cross-dressing, but because of his willful invasion of her personal space. Her screams were heard by a passing woodchopper person, or log fuel technician as he preferred to be called. When he burst into the cottage, he saw the melee and tried to intervene, but as he raised his axe, Red Riding Hood and the wolf both stopped. "And just what do you think you're doing?" asked Red Riding Hood. The woodchopper person blinked and tried to answer, but no words came to him. "Bursting in here like a Neanderthal, thrusting your weapon to do your thinking for you," she exclaimed. "Sexist, speciesist! How dare you assume that women and wolves can't solve their own problems without a man's help?" When she heard Red Riding Hood's impassioned speech, Grandma jumped out of the wolf's mouth, seized the woodchopper person's axe, and cut his head off. After this ordeal, Red Riding Hood, Grandma, and the wolf felt a certain commonality of purpose. They decided to set up an alternative household based on mutual respect and cooperation, and they lived together in the woods happily ever after. So in this version of Little Red Riding Hood, the ending is very different from any of the other versions you've likely read or watched. We also have the reference to a woodchopper person, so being very careful about not man or woman, as well as the alternate term of log fuel technician. We have Little Red Riding Hood, who isn't scared at all throughout any of this journey from home to dealing with the wolf, and is quite outspoken about her thoughts and equality. We also have the wolf stating he's very happy with who and what he is. He has no interest or desire to change. So it's just a different take on a very old story. There are a number of others that are equally enjoyable to read, and this particular collection includes The Emperor's New Clothes, The Three Little Pigs, Rumpelstiltskin, The Three Codependent Goats Gruff, Rapunzel, Cinderella, Goldilocks, Snow White, Chicken Little, The Frog Prince, Jack and the Beanstalk, and The Pied Piper of Hamelin. And I'm pretty sure that these versions are not versions that you're familiar with, having read or seen depicted before. But they're a very enjoyable and interesting read if you want a good chuckle and to visit some old favorites in a new form. Once upon a more enlightened time. This is also another collection of old favorites with some new twists and descriptions to them. This particular collection includes Hansel and Gretel, The Ant and the Grasshopper, The Princess and the Pea, The Little Mer Person, The Tortoise and the Hare, Puss in Boots, Sleeping Person of Better Than Average Attractiveness, The City Mouse, and The Suburban Mouse. So again, some updated descriptions for different terms. And just to give you an idea, with Hansel and Gretel, they leave breadcrumbs but can't find their way home. So they're out wandering, and in this particular version of Hansel and Gretel wandered along different trails, but after some time they became hopelessly lost and very hungry. Then, around a sharp bend in their path, they came upon a wondrous cottage made of carob brownies, sugarless gingerbread, and carrot cake. Even without a reassuring FDA label, the cottage looked so good that the children dived at it and began to devour it. They, of course, meet what is described as a woman in her golden years. Hansel asks, "Please forgive my bluntness, but are you a wicked witch?" The woman laughed. "No, no, my dear, I'm not a witch. I'm a Wiccan. I'm no more evil than anyone else, and I certainly don't eat little pre-adults, like all the rumors would have you believe. I worship nature and the goddess and mix herbs and natural potions to help people. Now why don't you both come in for a nice cup of coltsfoot tea?" So again, a very big difference from the Hansel and Gretel that you would have read. We go on to talk about the forest and a paper conglomerate wanting to come in. In this version of the story, Hansel and Gretel have changed their names. Hansel is now known as Heath Dweller. Gretel is now known as Gaia. So in this version, there is a huge issue about a paper-making operation, the woods, and it's a very different scenario from the Hansel and Gretel that you may be familiar with. As they're arguing back and forth, trying to come to a decision, the father says, "And this is how you kids repay me. Do you think it was easy being a single working parent? If I hadn't brought you into the woods that day, you wouldn't have found this whole new life for yourselves. And this is the thanks I get? What about my needs? I've been in the wood business all my life. Now what am I supposed to do?" So Heath Dweller and Gaia did him a favor and turned him into a beaver. After this ordeal, the Echo Heroes picked up their placards and headed back into the forest. Heath Dweller and Gaia worked hard at perfecting their supernatural skills, which they put to use solely for defending the planet. Their neighbors respected the siblings' privacy. Lest a stray incantation turned them into a different, though certainly not inferior, species. The magical brother and sister, their friends, and most important, the trees of the forest lived happily ever after. In this version, again, we have some different endings and terms to the traditional fairy tale stories that you may have read as a kid. I very much recommend both of these collections. There is a third that I don't have and I may take a look for in the near future. Let me know if you've read either of these collections. And do you think that a book published in 1994 and 1995 would still have terms considered politically correct now in 2023? Also remember, if you enjoyed this video or found some benefit to it, be sure to give that like button a little tickle, Leave me a comment down below, as both of those help the community to grow. And also, if you enjoy bookish content, silly cat videos, and clips of nature in her many different aspects, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. Until next time, happy reading.